Ladies and gentlemen, if you'll please find your seat, we're going to start the meeting. I'd like to call to order the Destin City Council January 26, 2018 special meeting. If you all will please stand for a minute of silence. Mr. Marler, would you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item number 1 is a discussion of Gulf Power's proposed electrical service franchise agreement. I think all of you have had time to peruse it and understand it. I'd like to ask Gulf Power to stand up and allow them a few minutes to give their point of view on the document, as well as allow any questions and answers, if that's all right with council. Mr. Smith, would you approach the podium? And anyone who's going to speak, again, please give your name, address, whether you're a resident of the city of Destin or not.
Ready when you are, Mr. Mayor. You ready?
You have the floor.
I appreciate it very much. Again, my name is Wendell Smith, and I'm here representing Gulf Power Company. And I'd asked the mayor before we started if it was okay if I got up and spoke beforehand. More than anything, I want to address your concerns. I want to address your questions. I want to address the document that you all have and specifics associated with that document. And I want to provide Gulf's position on a number of those items. I will be happy to address any question that you have. Can't guarantee you have all the answers. Bernard and Steve Griffin, our attorney, is sitting behind me. So hopefully we will be able to answer your questions. Before I get started, I know you all don't know who I am. I want to give you a little bit of perspective on where I'm coming from and my background and why I feel the way I do about some of these issues. Do we have Chef's chart that he used last time available? So I'll talk from that in just a minute, but a little bit of perspective. Sorry, there's no way I'll be able to read that. A little bit of perspective of where I come from. And that is, I spent the first 30 years of my 34-year career with Southern Company at Georgia Power Company. Now, why is that such a big deal? I started out as a distribution engineer. So when you start talking about distribution engineering, you talk about overhead underground conversions, you talk about road widenings, you talk about all that stuff. I don't speak from a perspective other than boots on the ground. So when you start talking about overhead to underground conversions, I'm the guy that's been out there taking notes, estimating those jobs, and doing them. And I've done them for well over 30 years. So it's just where I come from. You want to talk about storm response? I worked storm response from Beaumont, Texas to Richmond, Virginia to Nassau, Bahamas. I've worked hurricanes, I've worked tornadoes, I've worked ice storms. I've worked everything in between. So not that that's a big deal. I don't say it in a bragging fashion. I say it in a fashion of when I look at things and when I start going through this information, I look at it through the eyes of our customers. I look at it through the eyes of our employees and what it's going to take to get to where we are. So that's the lens that I look through. I am very proud to stand up here and represent the 1,250 employees at Gulf. So as we go through this item, please feel free to stop me, ask questions. I will do the best I can to address them in a short time frame, Mr. Mayor. All right, so if you look at the top of the list, and I'm sorry I can't see that, but I'll look at my copy. Franchise terms, 20 years. Certainly, you know, we can look at the various options there. Purchase option, still up for discussion. So not necessarily going to take it off the table. Still a topic of discussion. The 6% franchise, in perspective, 6% is the most that we have in our service territory. It's the most that we can find across the state of Florida. So when you look at 6%, is that the max? I don't believe there's any legal reason why you can't go higher, but that is the highest that we have right now in our territory. Indemnification, as Mr. Wright mentioned, not an issue there. So as we get below that stuff, and this is where I really want to spend a lot of our time, as I get below that stuff, as is on that chart right there, these are items that we have requested not be in the franchise agreement. Okay? That is not a surprise to anybody. That has been our stance from day one, that these items do not belong in a franchise agreement. So if we want to look at a separate document, a separate item, that's why we chose to put it in letter form. So as we look down through these items, our preference would be that these things not be in a franchise agreement. Okay? So look at number one, electric rates, and you see right there about the city accounts. Be more than happy to meet with you all, and correct, we'll do that for just about any customer. What's the best rates? We have a lot of options that are available, so we will be happy to look at that. The next one, which I know is a big item for you all, has to do with undergrounding. When we look at that 2 or 3 mile section, our commitment was to do the engineering work for a 2 mile section. So if you look at it from the bridge to Gulf Shores Drive, that's a 2 mile section. And that's what we agreed to do. We verbally agreed to do a 3 mile section during our last session, engineering only. And we agreed to do that. We'll talk more about that in just a minute. As far as the benefit to the city that you see up there, the 15 to 26 is completely inaccurate. Okay? The 2 mile section of engineering work at this grade costs more than your WHH study. That's what it takes to do that engineering work. So if you look at a 3 mile section, it's about $90,000 worth of engineering work that we have agreed to do. Now you can sit here and say, okay, it's because your costs are too high, and I don't buy that. Okay, I've done this work. I know what it takes. I know the time it takes. I know how detailed it is because I've done it. So those numbers are inaccurate. Next page, if you look at the underground, again, we agreed to do a 25% reduction on 2 miles, not 3, 2 miles. So when you start looking at those numbers and what it costs, the 750 to 1.5 is completely inaccurate. No question about it. Okay? The cost to do underground work on 98 is very expensive. Very expensive. There's one customer along that route. It will cost him $50,000 to put his service underground from where we stop to where he picks up. That's not an estimate. Okay? That's actual cost that it will cost that customer for an electrician to do that work. So those numbers that you see up there are too low. That credit, I think, will far exceed 2 times that amount. So as you start looking at those numbers, just keep that in mind. As far as undergrounding the entire city, we have been asked for a ballpark estimate to do that. That estimate will take about 4 months to do. So in a franchise agreement, for me to agree to do something that broad for a fixed cost is simply not going to happen. I do not have enough information to make that decision at this point. I can't. I can't put that kind of exposure on the ratepayers of Gulf Power Company to do that. Okay? So when you look at the $50 million number or the $72 million number, that number's too low. Now, we'll know more in about 4 months, depending on which estimate you all request us to do first. But that number will exceed that $70 million number, just because I know what it costs. Okay? Rate projections cannot guarantee any forward-looking rates, and that is Gulf's position. Okay? The Public Service Commission has the authority and the responsibility to set the rates of the IOUs. You all know that. Okay? That's not a secret. We fully respect the authority of the Public Service Commission to do that. So as far as rate caps, averaging rates, or things like that, we simply cannot agree to do that. That is the responsibility of the Public Service Commission to do that. Outdoor lighting, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Be more than happy to meet with you. And one of the comments that we put in the letter had to do with LED lights, the manufacturers, the offerings. They continue to change. They continue to enhance those offerings. If I tell you something today, by next month it will change because there'll be different products out there. That LED technology is really coming along, which you all are very familiar with. But from our perspective, we'll be more than happy to sit down and look at options and what we can do from a lighting projection. Same thing on the next item, which has to do with beautification of Main Street. The request was, how do you put up banners? What kind of banners can you allow? All that depends on the structure of the pole, what kind of pole you put in, et cetera, et cetera. So when you say banners on poles, my mind automatically goes to safety of the public and safety of our system, because those banners will cause a pole to fall depending on how big it is and what the weight is. So when you start looking at banners and what size they are, by all means, we can look at that and we can engineer that into those jobs. We talked about the substations, and you all have a list of that, and certainly can discuss that more. Same thing on the Gulf property. And our point was, if you want to use Gulf right away or some property that we have, by all means, you all, I think at what meeting before last, had a presentation about a park. Look, with engineering drawings and things like that, we call them encroachment agreements. We can certainly look at an encroachment agreement based on what you all want to do with transmission right-of-ways. We do it on a frequent basis, so that's not a big deal. Sustainability and conservation, looking at a PACE program, we're more than happy to look at that. Gulf already has a number of offerings on the efficiency side for our customers. So to look at an additional program, we'll be more than happy to take a look at that program and see what it will do. Last but not least is the school, and I don't think it will come as a surprise to any of y'all that, again, that's the county school responsibility to do that. So as far as physical construction of a building, Gulf will not support that position. Unfortunately, we're just not going to do that. As far as donations to STEM programs and stuff like that, Councilwoman, we had that conversation. Be more than happy to look at how do we contribute to STEM and technology programs at any school. So we'll be happy to do that. Mr. Mayor, that may have been longer than 8 minutes, but I did the best I could. All right, so last but not least,
thank you. Very thorough.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. I want to leave you with one thought before we get into questions, because hopefully it will help answer. You all, from our perspective, have two options, and those options are very, very plain. You have the option to continue to negotiate a franchise agreement, which we're doing, right? You all have every right to buy the system and create a municipality and operate that system. You do. As far as buying the system to sell it, Gulf does not support that position. We don't think that is an opportunity that the City Council has, and we are fully prepared to defend that legal position that you cannot buy the system to sell it to another party. So from our perspective, two options.
Councilmember Braden.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a few questions.
Sure.
When we have a hurricane, it tears up a lot of the infrastructure. Is Gulf Power the only company that comes in and rebuilds that, or do y'all get companies from other states that has nothing to do with Gulf Power?
First off, yes. I mean, we get companies from literally all over the country. I have had the pleasure of work with folks from all over the country in Canada. So we get those resources from where we can. Just like you all have heard, we are part of the Southeastern Electric Exchange, where we call in individuals from across the country. There's a whole methodology behind how you prioritize those resources. Irma's a great example of that. How you prioritize those resources and where they go. But yes, we have that. Plus, you know, depending on the path of a hurricane in particular, Southern Company is very, very quick to relocate resources out of non-impacted areas. So depending on where that storm is going, we have a very detailed plan that we go by whether it's 4 days, 3 days, 2 days, 1 day ahead of a storm, we do not want to put people in harm's way. We do not want to do that. So when we start relocating resources, we will do that in the safest, quickest manner that we possibly can. Right now, I will give you the plan for Central District, which is predominantly Okaloosa-Walton County. We have a specific plan to bring in 2,500 outside resources. I can't tell you where those resources are going to come from, but we have a plan to stage, house, and provide material for 2,500 people that will work in those two counties. Now, that's not to say we'll have 2,500 people on day one, but what it means is, depending on where they're coming from, is we have plans to house and work 2,500 people in two counties. So the last thing I'll add is this. We had a bunch of folks that left on Saturday going to Puerto Rico. I told you, I've been in Nassau, Bahamas. So, yeah, wherever there's trouble, we'll go. And same thing across Southern Company, and not just Southern Company. It's every IOU that's a member of SEE, from Pennsylvania to Oklahoma to Texas.
I've heard several people here recently saying, and I guess they believe that Gulf Power is the only company, or Southern Company is the only company that's capable or qualified to rebuild a system in this area. And I've noticed, and I've seen a picture of Gulf Power trucks on the back of a boat going to Haiti or Puerto Rico.
Right.
Puerto Rico.
Bless you.
But, I mean, that's, my question is, you know, or the reason I ask, because I know Gulf Power works with a lot of different people, a lot of different states.
We do.
And vice versa.
Absolutely.
I know Gulf Power is not the only qualified and the only company that can put this town back together. It was devastated by a hurricane.
Sure.
I'm
sorry, during Hurricane Irma, we actually went to Tampa and to FBNL, so it's done.
The other thing I wanted to address is the numbers that you say are inaccurate. I mean, I wouldn't expect anything less than you coming to us and telling us that the numbers that we've been provided aren't even close. I wouldn't expect you to stand up there and tell us that, you know, they're inflated and it wouldn't cost near that much. I noticed you went right by the beautification of the power companies at $25,000. That wouldn't even get started to beautify the power plant or the stations that we have on Main Street, Crystal Beach. And I mean, I wouldn't think that our attorney would set us up for failure, you know, by bringing us these numbers that, you know, that are too low. I mean, I know you can get cheaper and you get, you know, even the numbers you stated may not be enough for some of them. Another question that's been come about is, if another utility company does take this power, take Destin over, is Gulf Power the only place that sells electricity?
Of course not.
I mean, it's been said that, you know, if somebody else comes in there and takes over, Chelco or whoever, Duke, anybody else comes in and takes over the power, that we're going to buy power from Gulf Power anyway. I guess they're the only, Gulf Power is the only ones that are qualified to rebuild this town, and the only ones in the United States that sells electricity. I think there was, what, 96 nuclear plants in the United States? Is that correct?
I do not know the answer to that. But can I piggyback on your comment just a minute?
Absolutely.
No. Now, it depends on how you set the system up. Now, I would be happy to talk to you all at length about the WHH study and how it was set up and some things that were in there. It really depends on how you set it up and how you take service. If you take it off the transmission side, that is exactly correct. You can buy at the transmission level and wheel. You cannot wheel on distribution in the state of Florida.
Right. I mean, I think we were provided 6 different companies that we could actually buy power from.
As long as you take service at transmission level voltage, which is not what's in your WHH study.
Right.
Sorry, repeat that last line again.
On the transmission service, you can wheel on the transmission system, and as long as you take transmission level service, then you can buy in the open market. WHH told you that. You can buy in the open market. WHH's study did not include taking service at transmission level service.
Did not.
did not.
Mayor, that's all I have at this moment. Thank you.
Councilmember Destin.
Hey, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for being here. And
Thanks, Mayor. Wendell, I got a quick question for you. Being an attorney, you piqued my interest on a statement taking the legal position that we would not be permitted to sell after purchasing to a third party. Can you elaborate on that? Because, I mean, if the legal argument holds water, I would be sort of apprehensive to continue going down the idea that we could sell it to a third party. And maybe the attorney can explain it if he feels more comfortable, but I'm just a little bit confused and just want to understand your point and position.
Make sure you introduce yourself.
Right. Steve Griffin, Beggs and Lane Law Firm, 501 Comendencia Street, Pensacola, Florida, 32502. I've represented Gulf Power Company for close to 15 years in regulatory proceedings at the PSC. Many of those have been with or against clients of Mr. Wright's, and sometimes I agree with what he has to say, sometimes I don't, but that's not to be unexpected. However, I completely disagree with the characterization that this city can engage in a simultaneous buy-sell transaction utilizing that purchase option. Not going to get into the details behind our legal strategy or analysis on this right now. Suffice it to say that my firm, along with the Southern Company legal team, has spent a great deal of time and effort researching that matter, and we believe that it's inconsistent with the original purpose of that purchase option, which was statutorily mandated back in 1899 and then repealed in 1973. It's inconsistent with the purpose, and it also infringes upon, in our view, the exclusive and superior jurisdiction of the Florida Public Service Commission to regulate a coordinated grid, plan for utility infrastructure, and resolve territorial matters. So the suggestion that the city could simply bring in a new competing utility into Gulf Power's existing service area is not only unprecedented from a legal perspective, but it's very troubling from a jurisdictional perspective at the PSC. And that's all I can say about the strategy at this point in time.
I appreciate you. I understand that you can't tell, you can't divulge legal strategy. I'm just trying to wrap my brain around the idea that the PSC could object to a third party coming in. I mean, we're a third party in your jurisdictional area. We would, in fact, be a third party in your jurisdictional area because we would be purchasing it. And I just don't understand how it would be different if the hat was being worn by us or someone else. Yeah. But, that's getting into legal tit for tat. And yeah. So, okay.
Thank you. Councilmember Ramswell.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. I have a question. If we go back to, I believe it was the first item on the second page, undergrounding 2, and you had talked a little bit about an unanticipated costs and actually costs being higher than what we have been led to believe. And you mentioned that we were looking at about $50,000 to underground an individual property. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure. When we started estimating, now keep in mind, Gulf has been estimating portions of Highway 98 for 20 years. So when we start looking at what does that look like, how do we do it, you look at everything from right-of-way to underground facilities where they go, et cetera, et cetera. We actually had an electrician come in and look at one of the vendors along Highway 98, one of the restaurants, and looked and see what it would take to underground their service. Now, that was something that we did on our own simply to give us a perspective.
Recently?
2 years ago. Now, and it goes back to your comment about individuals and how they pay and how they do, and is it subsidized by the city, and a host of other things that go into that. But that's really why we did that, looking at those numbers.
Getting into what specifically is involved in that cost? I mean, obviously I'm not an engineer and I don't know anything about electricity other than what I've learned through all this research.
Sure.
But, it sounds like what you're saying is that y'all would entertain, and we could work out the details about undergrounding, except when you get to a property owner's property, and then it's going to be an additional 50K per property?
Not per property owner, that's only one. That was
Okay.
only one specific case, and I apologize, I should have made that clear. That was only one specific case that we looked at.
Okay, so
It's
this is
not for every one of
an
them.
extenuating circumstance. It's
Correct.
not every property.
It is not.
Okay.
It is not.
So this may sound hostile, and I don't mean it to be, but we have other power companies that operate around us. Obviously, I think Chelco is right across the bay, perhaps. You were speaking, Mr. Griffin, about operating areas and who's allowed in what area, and it would be unprecedented to bring someone else in. How, if one company's allowed to be north of the bay and y'all are here, why would it be unprecedented to, let's say, have the same one that's across the bay? That would be almost a logical connection. And what actually distinguishes the districts, and who decides that? Sorry, I went on about 3 tangents in one question.
Oh, that's quite all right. And it's not an easy question to answer here. It's fairly complex, it's legalistic, but the idea, and it's the Public Service Commission that has exclusive jurisdiction over that in terms of which utility serves in a given area. Sometimes that happens pursuant to agreements. So for example, Gulf Power Company has a territorial agreement in some areas with Chelco, or in the case of Gulf Coast Electric Co-op, we have an agreement with them in some areas. And that there is no agreement here in the Destin community. But the concern of the PSC is to ensure that there is not uneconomic duplication of existing utility services. That's one test that they look at. And so they say, if it's a greenfield site, never been served by another utility before, then they will say, okay, what is the respective cost of each utility to provide service to that area? And the utilities provide that information to the PSC, and the PSC makes a comparison, and ultimately, if there is a dispute, they resolve it based primarily on cost, but there are other factors that are considered as well. That's a greenfield area. I'm not aware of any situation where a municipality has exercised a purchase option and a franchise agreement and engaged in this simultaneous buy-sell type transaction that we've been discussing here today. And I think that the PSC would be very concerned about that, because you have one incumbent provider who has planned to serve this area and the surrounding community, which is essentially being evicted under the guise of a purchase option for service by a competing utility. And that, when I said unprecedented, that is what I was referring to.
Okay, so you said that there's no agreement here in Destin. Does that mean there's no territorial agreement here in Destin?
There is no territorial agreement here in Destin that I'm aware of.
So if there's no territorial agreement here in Destin, wouldn't that mean that we're not stuck? That's not the right word. If we are, we have to use you. Is that a correct understanding of the fact that if there's no terrestrial agreement, or territorial, excuse me?
Territorial agreement typically involves two different utilities who serve adjacent territories, and my point is that there is no such agreement as it relates to this area. But that doesn't mean that from a jurisdictional perspective, the Public Service Commission wouldn't have a concern or an interest in one utility serving an area that's already served by an incumbent investor-owned utility. The lack of a territorial agreement would not preclude the PSC from making a determination under their territorial act as to which utility has the right to serve. There are many areas across Gulf Power Service area where we operate daily without a territorial agreement in place. That doesn't mean that tomorrow some third-party utility could decide that they wanted to serve that area and do so. There would still be a territorial issue.
But with that said, wouldn't that also then tend to imply that without the territorial agreement in place, that others would be allowed, at least as viewed from PSC, I believe you call them?
No, and
No, it's not.
That's absolutely not the case. The lack of a
Okay.
territorial agreement does not alleviate that issue.
Okay, Thank you for addressing that.
Yes, ma'am.
And then my next question is, have y'all answered any RFPs to other municipalities or areas around us in this area recently?
Has Gulf Power Company responded to an RFP? Not that I'm aware, and I think I would be.
Okay, and then is there an instance in the past then? Let's expand the horizons a little bit. Have y'all actually responded to an RFP in which another electrical distributor already had that contract? Similar to what we're discussing right now, if we were to bid something out and Chelco or Duke or somebody came in, have y'all been on the opposite end of that scenario?
Not that I'm aware of. We have responded to RFPs for wholesale power, but not for the acquisition of an existing distribution system belonging to another utility that I'm aware of. That's not saying that hasn't happened, but I'm not aware of that.
I'm not either.
Okay, thank you. That's all for right now. I need to think.
Councilmember Marler.
Thank you. Since the PSC seems to have a lot of jurisdiction, I don't know whether this is going to come to you guys or Chef needs to answer this, but say we purchase it, then we have to go before the PSC, I'm assuming, in some capacity. They have to approve us to even purchase it. Because it's sounding to me like the PSC seems to have a lot more control than
I'm
we do.
going to let Chef address that because he's your counsel, so.
Okay.
You got to look out for UPL too, Wendell.
I'm just saying.
In my opinion, the PSC would not have to approve us purchasing. The city has the right to purchase pursuant to the franchise agreement, period. The PSC does not have jurisdiction over the franchise agreement, period. We don't have to do that. We would, if we set up a municipal utility, we would, ancillary to that, have to file tariffs with the PSC because that's more of a ministerial administrative requirement that says this is what we're going to charge. We'd have to do that. We would presumably, although it's not an absolute legal necessity, presumably we would do what Winter Park did with what was then Progress Energy Florida. We would enter into a territorial agreement with Gulf to where Destin would serve Destin and Gulf would serve the areas around Destin. And the PSC, if we went that route, the PSC does have jurisdiction to approve that territorial agreement.
Okay, that answered that question.
Okay.
I'll go back to them. See if I can word this right. All right, back to, first off, I guess the question is I guess since the 1920s or whatever, how long has Gulf Power been serving this county, or so to speak?
Pretty close. 81 years.
81 years, okay. And then the other question is that, because trying to get the right words, I'm confused about, and I think, I don't think the question got answered right. I guess it is like overlapping service or whatever it was you were talking about, where you serve here and another company can't come in and serve. I'm a little confused on that. And that, like I said, I understand the purchase agreement, but I guess the question is that we put on an RFP and then we got rid of the RFP because apparently something was wrong with it or something where we don't have the right to have, say, Chelco come in and
Councilman Marler, that's not why the RFP was pulled.
I know that's why it wasn't pulled, but I'm just saying. The confusion I got is they're saying that the PSC says we can't bring another power company in, but we can buy it and have somebody manage it, but we can't bring another power company in, is what I'm trying to understand.
Our position is that we believe that there are some legal shortcomings with the notion that you could do that. I'm not telling you here today that the PSC would would side with us on that argument. I'm saying I think they would, but I can't say that definitively, obviously. We're not in that posture.
Okay, so, and hang in there, Chef. So
Yes, sir.
the point being is that we either purchase or purchase it ourselves and then find somebody to run it, but we can't bring in somebody else other than Gulf Power or Southern Company.
And Councilman Marler, let me hop in real quick. I think you're going to get a different answer from Mr. Griffin and a different answer from Mr. Wright, and that's because
Yeah,
there's
well,
not
I
a black and white
understand
answer
that,
to it.
you know, I understand that's going to be a legal question. Anyway, that's all I got right now. Anyway, I'm sorry.
If it's okay with council, maybe we ought to ask Gulf Power to sit down and ask Chef Wright to address anything he wants to address it and then continue the question and answers. Sounds good? Mr. Wright, you got the floor. You got anything you want to touch on that has been brought up or that you might have a differing opinion or wish to clarify?
Maybe just a couple of things regarding the estimate of the engineering costs for the undergrounding job. I will tell you, I used values that are in Gulf Power Company's tariff. The lower end of the range, I think, is for urban commercial at $5,700 and change per mile to prepare a binding cost estimate, $8,600 and change per mile to provide a binding cost estimate for urban residential. Not knowing exactly what the composition is, I gave the range. I will tell you that in my rather extensive experience dealing with undergrounding, binding cost estimates are engineering estimates. They are relied upon, they produce plans, and they're relied upon by customers and the utility alike. The utility, once it provides such a binding cost estimate, is bound to charge no more than 1.1 times the cost estimate given. Now, if Gulf has something else in mind, that's fine, but I used the tariff rates to provide you the estimates that I provided. I have not done what Wendell has done. I have not actually done an undergrounding project. I wish I had. I've walked some, but that's about it. But the estimate of $1 million to $2 million a mile is not crazy. It could be more than that. It might be $1 million, it might be $1.5 million, it might be $3 million per mile. I don't know. I believe, based on my, like I said, somewhat extensive experience, that $1 million to $2 million a mile is a reasonable estimate, and the 25% of that is what it is for a 3-mile job, somewhere between 3 and 6 million. So the 25% credit would be the $750,000 to $1.5 million. It might cost more for Gulf to do it, especially if they do it with their conduit encased in concrete duct bank techniques, and that may be what it is. I provided you what I believe in good faith were estimates. I think I'm going to try to answer the question that both Councilmember Destin and Councilmember Marler asked to my friends from Gulf Power. I believe that you can do what we have talked about doing. Here's, in very simple terms, why. Gulf's position comes down to, yeah, you have the right to buy the system, but once you own it, you don't have the right to do what you want to with it. I don't believe that the Florida Public Service Commission or the courts of Florida will backstop that. And by the way, the purchase option, Mr. Griffin gave you an accurate characterization of its history. It was enacted, I guess, in 1899 or thereabouts, and repealed in 1973. It was not mandatory in 1986 when you all executed your franchise. I don't know who did that. It was a good thing for the city to bargain for and get in that franchise, but it was obviously on its face a freely bargained for purchase option. Yeah, I'm not telling you I don't expect litigation on the subject, but I am telling you that I believe that the city should prevail. And I'm happy to answer anything else, but that's...
Councilmember Dixon?
I guess my questions or comments are more for the Gulf Power people that are here right now. And one thing that I'd say for sure is that, you know, me as a council person, I would never be able to vote to give away the rights of a future council 20 or 30 years down the road. So as far as me going or me voting to allow the purchase option to be removed from this in a 20 or 30 year contract, that's just never going to fly with me. I'll never be able to agree to give away a future council's possible way to make things better for their community. The thing that Shep was mentioning just a few minutes ago about the possibility of not utilizing the casket system in the concrete where you can bore versus having to expose the ground and stuff like that. These are some of the considerations I'd like to see us, you know, go back to the table with and try to work out. I am disappointed in the fact that you're not willing to or not able to, I don't know, do anything with the future rates. I think that by now it's apparent that you make good money on this contract. And I think that you could do something if you really wanted to assist with the possible small reduction. But I think you choose not to. I know it's a investor-owned utility and that basically everybody's mouth's got to get fed from here to the Southern Company, and I understand that. But, you know, we are negotiating a new contract, and this is something that is going to be for a very long time. And I think that you know, with some concessions, and I don't see them here on this document, I got to tell you, some concessions, I think that we possibly could get there. You know, I guess that the counter offers that were suggested here, in my opinion, are within reason. The only, I guess, the thing I would say is that the high school, maybe that we could, yeah. I didn't say it was you. Never said it was you. I don't know. I don't have a clue who it was. And that may be something, but I do understand your reluctance not wanting to do that. But I think we can work something out. And I think that you know, we're talking about, and I think that's going to come up here, is the extension on it. And I think that within the time that we're talking about, we'll be able to either come to an agreement or not. And, you know, we'll work hard, I think, to try to come to some sort of agreement. At least I will. But again, you're going to have to be flexible on that purchase. I will not vote to do anything that's going to hamstring this council 20 or 30 years down the road.
And look, I appreciate your position, I do. One of the things I'd like to piggyback on is exactly what you just said, and that has to do with you don't want to make a decision today that's going to hurt somebody in the future. So when we start looking at the potential projects going on out there, underground in particular, one of the things that I don't want to do from my perspective is to set somebody up to fail as well. So when we start talking about methodology and how we do it, I'll talk more about that in a minute, but when you start looking at how you do that, I want to make sure that we set the City of Destin customers, as well as every other customer at Gulf Power Company, up for success. And that has to do predominantly with reliability. Cost is a factor associated with that. Now, when you start talking about how we do underground and how we do it the cheapest, I will tell you exactly how we do it the cheapest. Do it together. And that's the way we do it the best and the cheapest. I agree with you, Councilman. It takes give and take on both sides. But if we get out there and we figure out a way to schedule it and do it together, I'm talking about the City of Destin, Gulf Power Company, Bell, Cable TV, DOT, and a bunch of others, the best way to do it is together.
Please. Wendell, do you have authority to speak on behalf of Gulf Power today? It's just a silly question. Have you been given?
Sure.
Okay. And I think you may have brought up a good point earlier that some of these terms, you don't want to see those in a franchise agreement. If there's a vote tonight to counter based upon the proposed franchise agreement, I think Mr. Dixon indicate cut out the high school, but if they want all those other terms in there, can we take those out and put those into a separate agreement that y'all would consider executing at the same time as a franchise agreement?
Not everything that's in there. So I am not in a position to give you exact answers tonight. The thing that I will tell you is there are certain things that we simply are not going to do.
And I believe rates, you said that too.
Rates is a big deal, and we could talk for 2 hours, Mr. Mayor, I don't want to do that, but we could talk for the next 2 hours about rates and how they're going to change. If we're having this discussion 6 months from now, the discussion is going to be different on rates. Now, I could sit here and go line item by line item or things that are going to change for IOUs in the state of Florida. Whether you want to talk about tax reform, you want to talk about storm response, you want to talk about storm expenses, all that is going to change, I believe, in the next 6 months. The next 12 months, it will certainly change.
You're referring to the other IOUs rates going up, not your rates going down.
No, I'm not referring to that.
Okay.
Because it could be different. And I'll tell you why. We believe that in Gulf's case, the tax reform will have downward pressure on rates. Now, that's not to say the other IOUs are going to go up. If you remember, FP&L made a request for an increase in rates to pay for storm expenses. FP&L has asked to apply the savings associated with tax reform to storm expenses.
So you're indicating that there's a reasonable chance that Gulf Power's rates will drop in the next 12 months?
I do. Okay. Yes, I do. Our rates actually went down going into 15 and into 16 because of fuel cost. So that can happen. And look,
kind of going back, if we're to keep it moving forward though, so we should only include some things in a franchise agreement and the other items in a separate agreement that we can present to you at the same time.
Please do. Everything below that line, we would appreciate being in a separate. Look, we're willing to talk about it, willing to negotiate, but our opinion is that belongs in a separate agreement, not in a franchise agreement.
Councilmember Braden.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks again for all of y'all being here tonight.
Sure.
I know tonight, we called this special council meeting specifically for negotiating or going over this contract to try to negotiate something with Gulf Power. Sure. And we're continuing to do that. I know we've asked several questions that kind of got off task of handing out of the contract itself. But I just want to say thanks for being here, and I hope we can work something out. Come to meet in the middle, because it'd be best for all parties, because it get expensive going the other direction. I know myself, I can't speak to the other council, but I'm not looking to buy or change power companies, to save our customers $3 a month. That's crazy. If we can cut your power bills in half, we're going to have to do something. But, that ain't going to happen either. So,
unfortunately not.
So we're trying like hell to negotiate, something, get this contract back and going. I know we take a lot of flack from our citizens, but they want us to negotiate, and that's what we're doing. That's why we called this meeting tonight, is nothing but for you guys. Sure. And I hope we continue to do that. And just thanks again for being here.
Well, as I mentioned before, you all have a tough decision, and I understand it. You have a tough decision.
Councilmember Destin.
Thanks, Mayor. I think this is the most I've talked on the issue probably the whole time, but I echo Tuffy's sentiment. There is no possible way that I will support adopting an agreement that does not include a future purchase option. I plan to be here in 20 years, and this issue will come up again. Sure. Some of us won't, but I intend to be. So it's important to me that I don't hamstring or rob future council's ability to negotiate for something better if that's where they need to go. Further, I want to see the town undergrounded, and I say the whole town because I have a sort of a personal moral objection to only seeing 98 undergrounded. Sure. Because the entire city would end up having to bear the burden of that cost with a disproportionate benefit only to the folks who are on 98. Now you can say philosophically, everybody would benefit because if you beautify the main corridor of town, everybody benefits. You know, all boats would rise on a higher tide. But I'd like to see everybody, if everybody's going to share in that burden, I'd like to see everybody benefited. And to that extent, I've talked with some of our members in the community. I'd like to see the franchise agreement echo some earmarks and some safeguards, because 6% is 2% higher than where we're at right now. I believe we're at 4, right?
That's right.
I'd like to see that 2% earmarked for undergrounding, because if it flows into the general revenue fund, that extra 2%, we know what happens when it goes into the general fund. It spreads out. We don't know if we'll get necessarily any. I mean, it's the same thing at the legislature, same thing at Congress. If it goes into the general fund, it's hard to keep it in one area, because this undergrounding project could take the next 20 years.
Right.
And if we do it incrementally, I'd like to see you guys come up to the table and figure out if we can do it through a matching program to whatever. I'm not saying one for one, I'm saying something. But we gotta look at this, and I'm willing to work with Gulf Power to figure out what timeline that might look like and what those costs may look like.
Can I piggyback on that before you go to your
Yeah,
next
of course,
one?
of course.
So one of the things that we do with another municipality in our service territory is exactly that. And they come to us and they say, in 2 years from now. So they'll tell us this spring, they will tell us in 2020, here's the section that we want to look at. And we do a cost estimate for them. They build it into exactly what you just said. They earmark dollars associated with that project, and they carry it out in 2020. Now, this particular city has been doing this for a number of years. It's been a very successful program, and the reason it has is because they're working together.
Sure. On
roads and things where they have projects planned, working together and doing it side by side.
Sure. To keep us. What city is that? Oh, yeah.
Panama City.
To keep us moving forward tonight, you know, all of this needs more attention.
Sure.
And I think we need more time. We talked about it at the previous meeting. I think Tuffy brought it up as well. I think we probably need to entertain to extend the franchise agreement another year. I don't feel comfortable doing it 2 years right now. And the reason is that we have so much on our plate that if we extend it for another 2 years, there's a tendency within, you got so many balls in the air that you want to put this issue on the shelf and you say, well, we'll get to it next year. I want this council to feel like we need to get this handled. So I would support a motion to extend the franchise agreement another year. And if you guys are interested in doing that, we can move forward on that. And I'd also say to Mr. Wright, we need to communicate our offer probably simultaneously, because simply extending the franchise agreement for another year doesn't slow down this process. We need to communicate our counter so we can continue moving forward, so that once we get to spring of next year, we're all very comfortable. We have a clear idea of where we're headed. I don't know if I put that in the motion. I don't think I did. But you know what?
You did not. Would you make that motion?
I'm going to wait to make that motion, because I can see that I've got 3 speakers behind me. So, and if other people want to support that, I'll allow them their time to speak.
Before y'all make any motions tonight, if y'all do authorize a counter, can the motion include divvying up things that they were clear they do not want in a franchise agreement? Because I think they've been clear in previous discussions with us that don't enter into an agreement with the city. They just don't want that in the actual franchise agreement. It could be an agreement they enter into the exact same time. So.
Councilmember Ramswell.
Thank you. My question is actually for Chef. All right, Chef. So here's some concerns that popped up when you spoke a while ago. On the sheet, on the chart that we have, let's just go back to where you were discussing undergrounding 2. It's the top of page 2. In fact, yes, that's where we are. So you mentioned that it could possibly be up to $3 million, where we have here an estimate of the conversion charge being $1 million to $2 million per mile. And I believe you said it could be up to $3 million.
I might have been talking fast. What I thought I said is that for a 3-mile job, using what I believe to be a reasonable range for undergrounding costs of $1 million to $2 million a mile for undergrounding contributions in aid of construction, would produce a range of total cost, absent any discount, of $3 million, that's 3 miles times $1 million a mile, to $6 million, that's 3 miles times $2 million a mile. If you then reckon the credit, the 25% credit or discount that Gulf has offered against those two values, 25% of $3 million is $750,000, 25% of $6 million is $1.5 million.
Okay, no, that's good, because I
Okay.
thought, oh, well, now we've already tripled our costs. So I'm glad you clarified that, because the way I understood it was you were saying it could be up to $3 million per mile. So thank you for clarifying.
I think I may have said that, but that was a follow-on to Mr. Smith's remarks that it would be more than that, more than $1 million to $2 million, that I believe is a reasonable assumption based on my experience. And he could be right. We could find out.
And see, that's...
Now, there's one other thing. The city, in the hypothetical scenario where we're actually going to do this, the city has the right to do all or part of the work itself. You can hire your own contractors, buy your own equipment, although usually it's the best deal is to buy it from the utility company because they can provide it, which makes sense because they're going to ultimately maintain it, and they have volume discounts when they buy transformers and so on. But you can do all the work yourself and save a fair amount of money that way. Other clients of mine have done so.
Okay, so you are saying now that instead of the $1 to $2 million per mile, it could go up to $3 million per mile?
It could be. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's troublesome to me because, we're given a range, you think that's the range, and now I'm hearing it could be more.
Well, Gulf's vice president told you it could be more. I can't argue with him that it could be more. I think my estimate of $1 million to $2 million a mile is a completely reasonable estimate. But.
Okay. And then going back to the bottom of page 1, the prior slide, where I believe you've got down here 16K to 26K, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe, I'm not sure if it was Mr. Smith or Mr. Griffin, said that they believe that it actually was more like 90,000. I think that was you. Okay, so that's a huge discrepancy. I mean, that's almost 4 times a difference. And I'm just, on the bottom here, the Gulf will pay for the engineering estimate, and we've got down here 16K to 26K. And Mr. Smith said that actually he believed it was closer to 90. So I'm just wondering if you can shed some light on that, on why y'all's estimates would be so terribly different.
I cannot shed light on why their estimate is that it could be so much. I tried to explain this when I first came to the podium, that Gulf has a tariff rate to provide binding cost estimates for underground conversions. The rate for the binding cost estimate for urban commercial is $5,700 and some per mile. The rate for urban residential is $8,600 and some per mile. I multiplied 3 times 5.7 and got plus or minus $16.1 thousand, and 3 times 8.6 is 25.4, which I rounded up to 26. That's where I got my numbers. I will tell you that in my dealings with other utilities, the binding cost estimate is an engineering grade estimate. In my dealings with other utilities, my clients have paid the binding cost estimate required by the other utilities tariff. It has produced plans. It has produced a binding cost estimate. When the binding cost estimate is rendered, it obligates the utility to charge no more than 110% of that estimate. It requires serious engineering work. I reasonably believe, based on my experience with other utilities, undergrounding, and tariffs, that that's exactly what we were talking about. Now, if Wendell says it's something else, then it's something else, but I'm at a loss to understand it when their tariff rates are what they are.
Okay, so not that I'm trying to pit y'all against each other, but I mean, I honestly, I want to understand, and I think obviously our citizens want to understand. So how do you arrive at your figure, and why is it so different from the way Mr. Chef has calculated it?
So, and I agree 100%. When you look at the average cost to do that, those are the numbers. When you look at the job associated with Marler Bridge to airport, those numbers that I gave you are specific to that area. It is extremely detailed work along that route. There are sections, and Mr. Wright is 100% correct. There are sections that the cost will be less than that. But specific to the section from Marler to airport, that I believe is about $90,000 worth of engineering work.
Okay. Understand, though, that what I'm getting at here is the bigger picture, and that's, you know, if the numbers are this off in one area, then holy cow, how much are they off in another area where we're talking millions and millions of dollars? And so that's why I'm asking these questions. Yeah. It may sound nitpicky, but no. I do have an ulterior motive here as to why I'm asking these things. So.
One thing, I do appreciate Parker's question, but one thing that I would ask you to keep in mind, this one section that we're talking about is not typical. It's not average. It is very much above average. Whether it's engineering, whether it's construction, it is an above average cost to do that section. When you get into some of the residential neighborhoods and other things, it's significantly less than that. So when you look at averages, it's a little bit different, but you look specifically at this section, I believe those are the numbers.
Can I just ask you a question? Can I ask you a question? Are you saying that if we came to you, first went to Gulf Tariff and said we want a binding cost estimate for this job, 2.9 miles, you would propose to charge us more than the tariff rates?
I'm not proposing that at all.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, and that's completely fair. You're telling us you would actually do the work.
Chef, excuse me, please get close to the microphone.
No, that's good. We're good.
Thank y'all for indulging my questions.
And what I said was, I got it. They'll do the work, whether it costs $25,000 or $90,000, because that's their proposal. And he's not saying they wouldn't follow their tariff if we actually went through the normal channels and submitted that. And that's the right answer.
I'm good. Thank you.
Okay.
Councilmember Dixon.
I think what we got going is that we have, a lot of conflicting information that's getting out, and it's not getting out by probably anybody in this room, the family business for affordable energy or whatever it may be, is putting a lot of false information out. They are basically putting out information that's not correct, basically saying that we are trying to do something to undermine everything. I've seen everything in the world out there as far as, we on the take and everything. So, just to kind of go through everything here, I think, and the reason I insisted that we have the cameras here tonight is to let everybody know we're doing what I think we're elected to do, and that is to research the best alternative for the citizens of Destin. It probably is going to be, or it may be, that we come back to this Gulf Power contract and we basically implement it. It's good for another 20 or 30 years, but if we just basically took it and said, yeah, we'll sign off on whatever you say, I don't think the citizens would appreciate us not checking into this and making sure that we're doing everything within our power to hold the costs down and to try to do things that make our city a little bit more livable. I agree with Parker that I don't feel like the people that live in, the residential subdivision should be having to pay for underground utilities along Highway 98. I think there's different ways to do that through a MSTU or an MSBU or something that would take care of certain sections of areas, and then if a residential neighborhood wanted to do it, maybe them as well to come along and do it. And it'd be better to do it like that because you basically pay for it within time rather than to apply that to your electrical rates and you never get done paying for that. So, you know, I think that there's a lot of misinformation out there that are, as I said, getting people riled up, that for good to have them come to our meetings and good to have them express themselves. But, you know, before people kind of start judging everything, I wish that they would, you know, get in the know about everything. And I got to tell you, the reason I wanted the delay in the year is because I'm not completely in the know of everything. So, you know, ride along here with us and try to work with us and try to give us your information, give us your feedback, but at the same time, keep your mind open to different ideas and possibilities and things that are out there. This is the first contract that we've basically, other than the extensions that we've had, the city was incorporated in 1984. I'm not going on history lessons here, but this is the first contract we've had to come up with this with Gulf Power. So we're kind of wading our way through this thing and making sure that we're doing everything that we can, as I said again, for the citizens. So please, people that are out there, understand we're not trying to do anything to start grabbing all the money that Gulf Power is making or anything like that. It's one of those things that we are bound to check into and make sure that we're doing everything possible for the residents. And that's all I got. Thank you.
Councilmember Morgan.
Thank you. Tuffy, if you want everybody out there to hear you, I think you're going to have to try a little harder than that because people aren't listening to us. Because if they had, they would think twice about some of the propaganda that they've seen from family businesses for affordable energy. And they've so muddied the water at this point and deliberately misled the public that what I think would happen is if we didn't, well, first of all, if we extend our agreement for a year, will we retain the option to purchase?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
It is an extension
so
of the
the May
existing
date-
agreement,
So-
pursuant to which the purchase option vested in 1996.
So
Yes.
the May date would extend to,
May of 2019,
Okay.
if it's a one-year extension.
and the reason I say that, let's say that, you know, we exercise the option to purchase this soon before the May deadline. What I think would happen is you would see, pursuant to our charter, a referendum vote, and you would have a deliberately misled public voting on a referendum that they don't understand what they're voting on. And so I think this would buy us a year to, you know, further negotiate a favorable franchise agreement with Gulf Power if we decide to stick with them, and to at the same time try to educate the public a little better about the process that we're going through. And I'd like to address two more things. One is Mr. Destin had mentioned he objects to the idea of just undergrounding 98 and having the entire city pay for it. And I do agree, but I also think that if you can beautify 98, you're going to raise the property values of the entire city of Destin, because right now it is a very unattractive corridor in a beautiful place. Our main corridor is just wholly unattractive when you come over the bridge. So there is great value to that. Where I have the issue of contention I have with that is the 2%, you know, raising our franchise fee. Well, we already pay the highest power bills in the state of Florida. So we want to tack on an extra 1 or 2% on top of that? I don't. As a business owner, I don't. As a homeowner, you know, you have a $400, $300 July power bill. I know my power bill for December at the house was really high because of the heat I was using. I think everybody else's was. But, you know, we have a $15,000 power bill in July at Harbor Docks, you know. And so that's, and I think I speak for all of the businesses, that a 1 or 2% increase is significant, and it's not wanted by me, and I'm the biggest proponent of underground power lines. And without that 1 to 2%, we're not going to ever get underground power lines because Mr. Farmer knows we'll never find the money to do it. Maybe a special taxing district that you mentioned, you know, which I think you could get the property owners maybe to agree to, but I doubt it. So without increasing the franchise fee, we'll never have a stream of revenue to get the utilities underground. Maybe CRA money in 10, 20 years, yeah, a long time from now. So the 25% Gulf Power is offering us means nothing unless we increase the franchise fee, which is akin to raising taxes. I guess everybody's happy, the public's happy to pay their high power bill, like Rodney mentioned at last meeting. Well, Comcast, stick it to them, don't raise my taxes. Oh, high power bills, please let me pay Gulf Power. But if the city wants to take 2% of that to beautify Destin, I don't think that'll go over well. And as a business owner who pays between my two restaurants, I pay $50,000 a year. For easy math, let's say I pay $50,000 a year, which isn't far off, between the local market and La Paz. And so that's an extra $1,000. And to address what Rodney said about, oh, if you're just saving somebody $3 here on their power bill, we're not going to kick Gulf Power to the curb. These are the numbers Mr. Wright provided us, comparisons. And we're not talking about $2 or $3. We pay the highest power bills in the state of Florida. And Gulf Power says that in 12 months, those power bills might decrease. In all likelihood, I'll believe it when I see it, but we have a year of renegotiating this contract agreement, so we'll see if they do decrease. And we can talk about this in a year from now. But of the 4 major companies of the numbers I saw on the packet I received from Mr. Wright, Florida Power and Light is 28.66% cheaper than Gulf Power. Gulf Power is 13.97% more expensive than Duke Energy. They're 26.38% more expensive than Tampa Electric, and they're 7.04% more expensive than Florida Public Utility. Now, when you're talking about residential, that's $500. I haven't done the math, but that's many, many hundreds of dollars. $1,000 depending on the size of your home. And that's nothing to scoff at. But for someone like me who pays $50,000 a year annually, you're looking at saving with Florida Power and Light $14,330, $7,000 with Duke Energy, $13,190 with Tampa Electric, and $3,520 with Florida Public Utility. That's an average of $9,506 between those 4 companies that I, as a business person, would save. And I'm not speaking from a selfish perspective. I'm speaking for many business people in the city of Destin. Got one sitting next to me. I'm sure they'd appreciate a savings of $10,000, and they run freezers. They have a higher power bill than me, I can guarantee it. So we're talking about a significant economic benefit to the city of Destin if we could get significantly lower rates. And we're talking about real money, and for homeowners too. We're not talking about $2 or $3. They're significantly higher than their competitors, and the public doesn't understand that. So while we're renewing this, while we extend this franchise agreement for a year, I have no problem doing that, and I think it's prudent. I would suggest that the city, that we reach out to some of the biggest stakeholders in the city, sit them down at a table, these are people who do not come to these meetings, and they have not been privy to the information we've been privy to, and they have not seen the presentations that we've been given, and give them that information and show them those presentations. And I'm talking about folks like Alan Laird, Holiday Isle homeowners, Indian Bayou homeowners, the folks from the Emerald Grand, Claude Perry, he's a businessman, have the folks from the Chamber of Commerce sit down, business people, and look at the numbers. And I'm not saying Gulf Power isn't a wonderful corporate citizen to the city of Destin. They are. They're involved. They provide a lot of good jobs. They do a lot for our community. But one thing they don't do is provide us with affordable energy relative to their competitors, and that's a fact. And maybe in 12 months, tax reform, everything's going to trickle down. I'll believe it when I see it. But I'd like to see us get a group of businessmen, some of the biggest stakeholders in the community, sit down, look at all the documents we've seen, get them, maybe they'll support it, maybe they don't. If they don't, from a business perspective, I don't know why you wouldn't. But if they don't, I'll respect their decision. And the public, I'm sure they'll educate the public, well, on what they found. But if they found the same information that I found, well, I'd like to pursue a different energy provider. I'd like to look. And I think you'd find similar business people would agree with me. So I'll support what Parker said. I do disagree about raising the franchise fee for now. That's it, thanks.
Could y'all put up that comparison chart that Mr. Morgan was discussing so people can see what we're talking about?
While they're doing that, let's take a 5-minute break. We're in recess for 5 minutes. If we can return to our seats, I'd certainly like to restart the meeting. I think we're well over 5 minutes. If everyone will please return to their seats, I'd like to call for order. We're back in session. Councilmember Marler.
Thank you, Mayor. This will either be for Mr. Johnson, Mr. Smith, or both of them. I have the biggest problem that I think is that we're having with the cost of the going underground is basically the breakdown of what it's going to cost. I've already talked with Bernard for a few minutes about this. There's a lot of different factors that I would like to see, at least maybe a Cliff's Notes version or a thumbnail version of the current cost of certain things. When you start going from above ground to underground, the following things you got to look at. Above ground, you've got bare transmission wires in most cases. At least I believe that's what they still use, and you've got the multitude of that, which are easier to handle and work on above ground. And you also have mounted transformers, which the little round ones that everybody sees look like big cans. I'm an electrician by trade, so I'm familiar with what they do. So you're going to bury everything underground. Well, then you're going to have the cost of conduit, Schedule 40 or Schedule 80 conduit, depending on how much stuff in there. Insulated wiring, the cost of the wire, aluminum, copper. You can only make a spool of wire so big. Then you have we talk about the concrete conduit areas or J boxes where everything would be joined together. Then you got digging. You got the cost of the other utilities also going underground because most of the utilities are using Gulf Power's poles, and everything goes underground, the poles go away. So what I'd like to see in some of this coming back to us, if we extend this for another year and we're negotiating, is it doesn't have to be a complete breakdown, so to speak, but basically a cost estimate on what, say we did it in 2 years, we started digging for underground in 2 years, based upon what the prices of the material is at the present time, labor, material, all that stuff. And when we talk about rates, one of you can answer that question for me, the current kilowatt hour rate that is used right now. Either one of you know that one?
I do not have it in front of me what that cost per kilowatt hour is. I can look it up, but I don't have it in front of me.
All right. Bernard, do you?
I don't have the Gulf rate schedule with me. Yeah, we can get it for you. It's
okay.
It's public information.
All I'd like to see is, rate? Are you talking about the base rate? Because I have that whole chart.
Standard residential rate.
For Gulf Power, it shows customer charge $19.50, and then base rate, including customer charge, is $102.56 for 1,000 kilowatt hours.
Okay, that's good. All right.
That's as of December 2017.
Okay.
But anyway, what I was getting at with the other stuff, the confusion is you're giving us an estimate of, say, $1 million to $2 million a mile or whatever it is, and you're basing that cost estimate on material that, we'd like to see something on, based, the material, what it would cost. Let's say how much the conduit would cost to go 1 mile on the current rating, current pricing of conduit, wire, the whole 9 yards, because I think that's where some of the difference is. It might go down, it might go up, depending, copper usually doesn't go down, it usually goes up. But, the advancements in using aluminum and other various types of wiring versus copper, and how their conductivity, plus, we still have fiber optics to look at, years down the road. So if we could get that, I'd appreciate something.
Sure.
something there. I think that would help clarify part of the problem with the council of knowing what it's actually, the breakdown of what it actually costs, you know, including the labor cost.
Sure.
All right, that's all I have, Mayor.
Councilmember Dixon.
No, sir. Sorry, I must have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would, Councilmember Destin, would you entertain making your motion? I don't see any further discussion by council at this point.
Yeah, Mayor, I think it's probably easier to do it in two motions. Probably a motion to extend the franchise agreement for 1 year, and then also probably a follow-up motion to instruct our legal counsel to transmit a counteroffer. So I'll just do it in two parts if that's okay with the council, and I know we'll have public comment, but I'll go ahead and make the motion that we instruct legal counsel to negotiate a 1-year extension with Gulf Power regarding the franchise agreement.
Second.
I have a motion. I have a second. I do not have any blue cards from the public, but I didn't really announce that earlier. Is there any member of the public that would like to speak at this point? And you need to speak just on this motion, please. Not seeing any. Council, any further discussion?
Okay, I just want to make sure the public has the ability to comment on this topic as a whole.
The second motion is going to be about this. What the mayor's doing is we've got a motion on the floor that's just about the extension. If they want to talk about the extension right now, would be the appropriate time. The next motion I'm going to make is going to be about issuing the counteroffer and everything that goes along with it. That might be more appropriate for what I think probably the general public wants to speak on rather than just the extension.
Unless they want to speak on the extension, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. Any further discussion from council? If not, I call the question. Unanimous yes, motion passes.
Mayor, I'll make a second motion that we instruct Mr. Wright and Mr. Burns to transmit a counteroffer that we've discussed tonight over to Gulf Power.
And for clarification, before the motion's completed, would that be including portions you want to remove and whether or not you want to do it in two separate agreements?
Right. The portions we want to remove and to allow it for the points that were brought up by Mr. Smith within the agreement to be executed in a supplemental agreement that would be contemporaneous.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. This is a matter for public discussion. Any member of the public would like to speak on the proposed electrical service franchise agreement? Not seeing any. Council, further discussion? No further discussion?
Mayor, real quick, just for clarification, I guess since y'all didn't actually mention it in the motion, is the high school being cut out of the agreement?
That's in my motion, yes.
That's in the motion. Is that clear on the second?
Second.
Council understands the motion. I call for the vote. Unanimous yes. I have no further business to offer the council. If no one wants, public, anyone would like to discuss anything? Now it's open. Not seeing anyone. Mr. Tadlock.
Yeah, I'm Guy Tadlock. I live at 502 Noriego. And I just wanted to thank the council for your due diligence in looking into doing everything you can for the citizens of Destin to get the cheapest and the most reliable electricity that we can get. I know it's been hard. You guys have, y'all stayed on point, and you continue to stay on point, and we certainly applaud that. But you're getting beat up now, unfairly, I think, by the lobbyists. I continue to get robocalls and postcards, and I tell you, as as a citizen, when you start getting those kind of things from Washington lobbyists, you better be careful because something's cooking and it's likely not good for you. But, you know, we wouldn't expect anything less from our elected officials to look out and make the best decision for our citizens. And it's kind of a shame that we can't have a fair discussion and allow you guys to do your due diligence. You know, I'd like to just mention a couple of things, and one of the things that I've found is that it seems like the people that represent Gulf Power are stand-up kind of people. I've gotten to know Mr. Johnson, a real nice guy, and I think they're doing the best they can. But I think without a doubt, if you delve into it and if you look, their holding company, the Southern Company, is involved in this. I mean, there's no doubt about that in my mind. These robocalls and these postcards, they're not cheap. So if you start looking around, and I want to offer this as encouragement for you to continue looking at this and driving to get the best deal that you can. But, you know, if I'm not mistaken today, I didn't catch all the news at the very end of the day, but I think the stock market hit a new high today. And if you look at it, their Southern Company was just a few pennies above their yearly low. So while the rest of the market has been doing very good over the last year, the Southern Company hasn't fared that well. And I think that's probably part of the issue. And if you look at them and if you do a little bit of reading, and I'm certainly not a financial guru by any shake of the imagination, but if you look at it, basically the Southern Company has got to do several things, but three of the things they got to look at is increase their consumer base. They certainly don't need to be losing any of their consumer base. They can do that by growing their markets, but it's kind of hard to do in that industry. But they certainly can't afford to lose it. The other thing is reduce operating costs. If you read the various financial reports on the Southern Company, it actually sounds like that many of the subsidiaries have done pretty well in reducing their operating costs. But they still have a very high overhead. And that overhead is going to be difficult for them to deal with. And it primarily is going to come at whatever they do at the corporate level. And it means that more than likely there's going to have to be some restructuring. But nevertheless, I'm not real optimistic that Gulf Power going forward is going to be able to consistently give low rates or competitive rates with the other industries unless there's significant changes. But again, I want to thank you guys. I think you're certainly going in the right direction. I think if there was a decision made tonight, I think it'd be better than what it would have been done had this automatically been done, what was it, 2 years ago. I mean, you guys are clearly making progress here, and I'm hopeful that that good, strong, fair negotiations will continue, and that you ultimately will be able to make the right decisions for the city of Destin. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was the only speaker I saw. Bernard? Whoop, excuse me.
Me first or Lee?
Yes. You first.
Yeah, real quick. Councilman Kyron asked me a question during the break about rates and how we're set up and structured and all as relates to underground. The lines that run along the north side of 98, those are the transmission, just to identify the difference between the two, those are the transmission lines. What runs along Highway 98 are distribution lines. So going forward, as we're looking at this underground process, obviously it'd be nice to take a magic wand and just, make everything that's overhead visibly go down to be underground. And considering everything that's got to go underground, you're looking at location of pad mount transformers, switch cans. That's just our stuff. Then you got phone and cable. All those things got to be considered as well. You also got to consider how tight the property is in downtown Destin and securing easements for all that. So I'm not saying it's impossible to do. I'm just saying there's got to be, some giving of some properties and things of that nature there as you try to get not only our equipment that needs to be above ground to serve the underground facilities, but that of other utilities as well. So, to try to break it down, to, kind of go, schedule 40 conduit and wire and, what is going to be in concrete duct and what is not. There is some concession there on our part, obviously, that, everything does not have to be in conduit. I mean, it does not have to be in a concrete duct bank. There are options to put it in conduit. It could be bored. Back in 2007, just to give you an idea, from Highway 98 up Main Street to Airport Road, that piece there, that half-mile piece is a little over $3 million to do that. So, and there's still, a guy that, is not underground. Now, obviously, we want all the business owners to agree for it to be underground going down 98. So those are just things that, we need to work together on to try to get figured out. So I just wanted to address your question and the break, then we'll get back and talk about rates. It's different between, the 1,000 kilowatt hours versus the average use in Destin and all that. So it's just a big thing to kind of wrap our arms around, but I just wanted to get back with you guys on that. All righty? Thank you.
Thank you. Lee, I think you'll be our last speaker. I didn't see anybody else.
Thank you. Lee Moore, representing Howard Group. On the subject of the cost of undergrounding, we would just encourage you to, as you've been doing in a lot of areas, continue to do a lot of research on that. The concrete duct bank has been brought up by the folks at Gulf a few times in the last couple meetings. It explodes the cost of your undergrounding. And there's not a whole lot of that being done. There are plenty of roadways that are similar in nature to 98, close to the coast in Florida. I'm sure you can imagine. We got a lot of those that are being undergrounded. So it would be good to research what the costs have been and are of those undergrounding projects, because the specifications required by whomever's doing the undergrounding or driving the undergrounding, whether it's an investor-owned utility, a municipal utility, a cooperative, that's what's going to drive your costs. Now, the nature of the area you're undergrounding certainly will too, but you'll see different approaches and philosophies about the specifications for undergrounding in different areas. And so, or in the same areas, but just different approaches by different companies, municipalities, whatever it is. So I'd really urge you to get a good handle on that, as well as getting a good handle on the details and specifics behind what Gulf Power is saying their costs are, because that'll be really, really important. And, it's been said that this is all about undergrounding. I completely disagree. I've heard a whole bunch of aspects and issues discussed in all of these meetings, and undergrounding's just been one of them. But we also feel that undergrounding is critically important. I don't think that we can even grasp what the benefit would be of undergrounding. And we also want to echo that, because we talk about undergrounding a lot in a public setting, that we agree with Mr. Morgan and Mr. Destin, that, and whomever else up here has said it, that undergrounding US 98 is not the only goal. We feel the entire city should be undergrounded. We also agree that all citizens benefit from undergrounding your major thoroughfares. And how you choose to fund it, different, but I think it is true that all the citizens will benefit from that. And so just encourage you to really dig into that, and I think the extension's a good idea. It gives you more time to pull, to really pull together more and more facts and figures. And then, last of all, I want to just echo, without saying it again, everything that Mr. Tadlock said. Really appreciate what you all are doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, one more. Okay.
Thank you. Carrie Harbarger, Spring Lane. And I want to thank the council for at least aggressively attacking this as a business owner, and of course, like other businesses, freezers and such. And, I wanted the knowledge too. I know that there's been a lot of negative feedback, and I hate that. I'm looking around here, and I can't tell you how many people I called and begged to come to this meeting. And the very ones that I have fussed with on Facebook about please being here, they're not here. They have no intentions of coming. And I applaud you guys for taking that off your shoulders and knowing that it's doing what's right for us, not for the ones that want to be negative Nancy. I'm not saying I'm for or against. I just appreciate that y'all are doing it as a business owner, because we own several homes in here, and my power bill is my biggest overhead outside of paying my people. number one. And so thank you for at least doing what you're doing and addressing it, and that's all I have to say.
Mayor, before you slam the gavel, I will say this for clarification. I was referencing 1,000 kilowatt hours in my numbers. And so when you ratchet it up to my kilowatt hours, which is likely going to be 10, 15,000, depending on the season, maybe more, Gulf Power is still more expensive, but the numbers aren't quite as much. It varies, but we can break those numbers out. But it's still a significant savings.
Thank you. Any further comment from council? If not, I adjourn the meeting.